It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast after the weekend. A little bit too early for you coming back on a Monday. Does always feel that way after the weekend, particularly if you've been having a look at property. If you haven't and you're still wanting property news and information, well, you're at the right place because we're doing that 7 days a week. You can catch us on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Amazon. December the 9th today, my sister's birthday, so I won't forget that. And we know that the rental squeeze is real. It's causing all sorts of flow-on waterfall problems down the road, especially around the cost of the living crisis. And if you're chasing cheaper rentals further out, and it is cheaper, be careful of the illusion of what some of these rentals are offering. Now, for example, Domain last week, they ran an interesting piece on one man's hidden costs. He is a 59-year-old tech worker who moved further from Melbourne centre to find affordable rent. While saving on rent, other expenses have soared, including long commutes and high energy bills. Now, the man's poorly insulated home, 28 k's from the city, is costing him $20 daily to heat, adding 20% to his rent. And new research shows how trade-offs for cheaper rentals, such as poor housing quality and location, often masks true affordability challenges. That got me thinking we need to discuss this more, and we're catching up this morning with Adam Crowe from the Curtin University. They've got a new report out which is documenting some of this stuff. Adam is the report's lead author. And good morning to you, Adam. Welcome to the Real Estate Breakfast. Great to have you on. What is the name of this report, first off?
Good morning, Craig. Thank you so much for having me on the show. So the name of the report is Measuring Housing Affordability, Scoping the Real Cost of Housing.
Yeah, so just back to what I was saying there, you know, this 59-year-old, he thinks he's doing the right thing. He's found himself a cheaper rental. You know, this will be happening all over the country, and it's a bit of a false sense of the true value of what you're paying for.
Exactly. And that's precisely why this report was commissioned. And it was really to take a critical look at how we measure housing affordability in Australia. We understand it as that relationship between just the direct cost of housing and household income. Government policy typically steps in when you're spending more than 30% of income on housing, and that typically applies to the lowest 40% of income earners. But what our report shows is that metric, it leads to misleading conclusions about what is truly affordable, because it doesn't capture a lot of those trade-offs that households make to try to stay within that 30% of income housing cost.
If you just sort of broaden that out for everybody a little bit more this morning, why do you believe then the current housing affordability metric is failing, as you say, to account for the broader trade-offs households make? And what are the most critical aspects that it does overlook as borne out from your report?
It's a good question. The metric that we use, this 30%, it's insensitive to factors such as household size, so the number of people living in the home. It's also insensitive to even the formation of households. So you might have younger people that 10, 20 years ago would have been ready to form their own household, but they're staying in the family home for a lot longer. That housing affordability metric that we use doesn't capture that. And then importantly, what we looked at in this report is what's the actual condition of that home? What does it cost to run it? And what's the cost on your health and well-being? And then also those locational and neighbourhood factors as well. Can you choose to live in a location that is right for you?
Yeah, so that's really interesting because the quality and the location just so really, really important when it comes to looking for quality housing in a decent neighbourhood and the proximity to essential services, which is what you've touched on, which do really contribute to the true cost of affordable housing. Well, let's have a look right now at the social impacts because this is huge. Perhaps just talk and elaborate on how affordable trade-offs lead to social exclusion, such as limited access to friends, work, or resources perhaps, and the long-term implication of these issues.
What we found was that homes in lower cost areas, they come with higher transportation expenses. They can isolate residents from, as you mentioned, key services, job opportunities, but also social connections. So are you within proximity to your family, friends? What we found is that the lower cost areas are typically on the urban periphery with more affordable housing, but those high transportation costs, they can and do lead to those experiences of social exclusion and other forms of disadvantage.
All right, so we are talking to Adam Crowe. He's from Curtin University, having a look at that very big question this morning about affordable housing and what the true value to some of the housing being offered further on the outskirts are. We'll come back with some more questions and find out a little bit more from the report after this.
From powerful and up-to-date news to professional real estate experts with the latest property trends on the Real Estate Podcast.
And right now it's time for another 30-second property tip, and we are taking you back to Western Australia and to Broome. Stephen Cole is there. Stephen, what have you got for us in the way of a tip this morning?
Look, I suppose it's a tip for agents as well as buyers and sellers alike is around contracts. I think everyone has had a difficult experience in real estate. It doesn't matter who you speak to, but I think a lot of that tension comes from not being explained whose obligations certain things are and what to put on a contract. So for me, it's really about being completely transparent when we're signing that contract or presenting an offer to a seller, that the buyer understands completely what their rights are and the seller understands what their obligations are. I think, when that is transparent, everyone knows up front before that offer is signed. At that settlement process, we don't have issues. Everything runs through smoothly.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is if you've got a question, don't be scared to ask, because sometimes when people are transacting, they just sign away, instead of really asking, getting into the detail.
Absolutely. I think, and DocuSign has a lot to say for that too. I think as an agent, it's very easy now because we're transacting so many properties just to send through a DocuSign and assume the person that's signing that understands what they're signing. We really do, especially that first home buyer market you're talking about, sit down in the office and explain exactly what a contract is. We do this every day as agents, but a lot of buyers and even sellers don't understand the process. So taking the time to explain, what are you actually signing here?
Yes, it's all about dotting the I's. Thank you for that, Stephen. We call that a cautionary property piece of advice, and it will certainly save you money. Now, something this week which is happening that a lot of us have forgotten about, maybe it's just the time of the year, and that is the Reserve Bank of Australia is meeting for the final 2024 decision on the cash rate, currently set at 4.35%. In fact, they've got a little bit of a meeting which starts today, runs through until tomorrow. Some of us are living in hope that the rate cut this month is going to go backwards. However, experts are saying don't get too excited. It's probably months away. Homeowners and buyers, of course, will need to watch for the bank's response following the RBA's decision tomorrow. I think it's a fairly easy prediction. There will be no change, but we will cover it anyway. Anthony Landau will be here tomorrow afternoon with me, the second that the RBA has decided on what to do. And if you haven't followed us yet, now is the perfect time, of course, to do that. Never miss out on a single piece of property news.
We are more than just a real estate podcast. Follow each week all of the main talking points and know your property.
And it is a Monday morning. Yes, Monday real estate. And we're talking to Adam about the true affordability factor when people are chasing cheaper rentals. Now, Adam, we should have a look at the energy efficiency side to all of this, which you have touched on. You've mentioned the need for mandatory energy and thermal performance disclosure for homes. How would that sort of policy work and help address affordability to reduce the burden on households exactly?
It's a really good question. I'll start by just maybe setting a bit of context. We use a ratings tool in Australia to measure the energy performance of our house. The standard has been raised to meet 7 stars. Now, research has shown that the average Australian home is 2 stars. They're homes that are really costly to run. They're cold in winter, especially if you're in some of the colder regions of Australia, and they can be extremely hot in summer. So they're really uncomfortable to live in, and they require very significant amounts of energy to try to keep them at a comfortable temperature. So you can see that that has significant environmental implications and certainly doesn't help Australia to meet its climate targets. At the same time, it also has really important health implications for households, particularly for lower and moderate, even up to middle income households now, who are having to make really difficult decisions about whether to dedicate a significant amount of money towards energy costs or practicing something called energy rationing. So choosing to go without to save money. We don't do a very good job at tracking the quality of our homes across Australia, which is why there is the call for a mandatory disclosure of the energy performance when you are leasing or selling a home.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Adam, for coming on to the Real Estate Breakfast this morning. Good work. Keep this up because I think it's very informative. People otherwise don't know the full picture when they look at these outer suburbs getting further and further away from the CBDs and the like. And enjoy your Monday.
Thank you so much for having me on the show, Craig. Appreciate it.
If you're confused about the property market, don't be. Unlock and educate yourself with the latest trending analysis and interviews.
So you're spot on. A lot of people probably, weighing up the options. Do I put a second story on my home and renovate, or do I buy the turnkey option? And at the moment, I think majority are opting for that turnkey option.
We can't be sure of anything because we can't trust a single soul with what they say. We can't trust the economy. We can't trust other countries. We really don't know what the situation is going to be like next year.
They got into the lift, they came all the way down, the lift door opened on the ground floor, and by that time he said, do you know what, I'm just going to go for it. They got back into the lift, and by the time they went back into the room, that unit had already been snapped up.
Cars. The hope for the environment is that you encourage electric vehicles, that you build the right charging infrastructure into the houses.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.